To my dearest friends, scattered like stars across this bewildering planet, before we begin this journey together, let me tell you what you're about to witness. A systematic deconstruction of every comfortable lie we tell ourselves about our precious life. Today, we will unearth the fundamental fractures in our civilization, because a diagnosis must precede any cure, and we've been treating symptoms while the disease metastasizes. But first, a gift. I'll tell you the ending now so that you can relax into the discomfort. We're not doomed. We're not broken beyond repair. It's not that bad. We're in transition. A messy, painful, complicated, and necessary transition. But every problem I'll dissect contains the seeds of its own solution. Every catastrophe carries instructions for reconstruction. By the end, you'll understand why I have a stubborn, irrational hope for our species. But to reach that hope, we must first walk through the valley of uncomfortable truths. Here's what awaits you. We'll explore how we became imaginatively impoverished at the exact moment we need visionary thinking most. How algorithms ate our souls and sold them back to us as subscriptions. Why half of us are lonelier than any humans in history, despite being more connected than ever. How we built an economy that requires the cancer logic of infinite growth or death. Why we traumatize children for 13 years and call it education. How we pathologized the human condition and made wellness a luxury good. We'll dissect the attention wars that turned your consciousness into a commodity. The commodification of everything sacred. The surveillance state we paid to build around ourselves. The death of expertise in the age of Google University. The productivity cult that made us efficient at being miserable. How we all moved to different planets while sharing the same Earth. And finally, the meaning crisis that underlies all others. How we lost the plot of our own story. If this sounds overwhelming, good. It should. These aren't TED Talk problems with TED Talk solutions. These are civilizational growing pains and growth hurts. But here's why you should stay until the end. Understanding these problems deeply is the first step toward freedom from them. You can't escape a prison you don't know you're in. And yes, this matters to you personally. These are the water you swim in, the air you breathe, the invisible forces shaping your anxiety, your relationships, your sense that something is deeply wrong, even when everything looks fine on Instagram. This letter is a map of the maze we're all wandering in. Not a perfect map. I'm wandering too, but it's better than no map at all. Before we dive in, know that this project exists because of you. Irrevelato remains fiercely independent, thanks to the dear souls who support this work through Patreon and YouTube memberships. To those already supporting, you're enabling a rare space for deep thinking in a shallow world. Your names may not be in lights, but your contribution lights my way. For those who want to dive deeper into the inner circles of Irrevelato, the Soul tier on both Patreon and YouTube unlocks exclusive videos where we go even deeper, exploring topics too raw or complex for the public sphere. Higher tiers open direct dialogue. You can commission explorations of topics that haunt you, peek behind the curtain at how these ideas take shape, and even influence the direction of future investigations. Think of it less as supporting content and more as joining a secret society of people who refuse to accept surface explanations for deep problems. But support or not, you're here, and that matters. In a world optimized for 30-second attention spans, you're about to invest a few tens of minutes. That's already revolutionary. So subscribe if you think I deserve your attention, not for the algorithm, but as a bookmark for your own path. Share if you know someone drowning in these same waters who might need this map. Comment with your own observations, because the best insights often come from the community, not the creator. And like if you want, the algorithm gods demand their sacrifices. And who am I to deny them? Yes, I see the irony in asking you to subscribe while critiquing the attention economy, seeking support while discussing commodification. But we must work within the world we have while building the world we want. Every revolution needs resources. One last thing before we begin. I write "we" throughout this letter because these aren't your problems or my problems. They are our problems. We built this world together, consciously or not. We maintain it with our participation, and only we can reimagine it. So think of what follows as a conversation between fellow travelers comparing notes on the journey. All of us are both students and teachers. The coffee has gone cold, the hour is late, and the truths won't get more comfortable with waiting. So pour yourself something strong, a tea, a glass of wine, or simply attention and intention. And let's begin. Remember, the darkest part of night is just before dawn, and we have some darkness to traverse. But I promise you this, the dawn is coming, and it's going to be spectacular. Now let us begin. Let me start with the most insidious problem, the one that underlies all others, like a bass note you feel more than hear. We have become imaginatively impoverished at the exact moment in history when we most need visionary thinking. Think about it. We live in an era where we can edit genes like text documents, where we've photographed black holes, where artificial minds are learning to think, and yet our vision for the future looks suspiciously like a shinier version of 1950s suburbia, just with better phones and electric cars. We're like children who've been given a box of infinite crayons but keep drawing the same house with the same triangle roof and the same smiling sun in the corner. The poverty isn't in our tools or our intelligence, it's in our capacity to imagine fundamentally different ways of being human. We treat capitalism not as one possible economic system among many, but as if it were a law of physics. We approach democracy as if the current forms were carved in stone tablets rather than rough drafts scribbled by men in wigs. We've confused the map for the territory so thoroughly that we've forgotten the territory might extend beyond the edges of our yellowing charts. Consider how we approach our greatest challenges. Climate change? We imagine solutions that let us keep doing exactly what we're doing, just with solar panels. Inequality. We propose tweaks to tax codes rather than questioning why we've built a world where some children are born into dynasties while others inherit dust. Mental health crisis? We prescribe pills to help people adapt to insane conditions rather than questioning the sanity of the conditions themselves. The ancient Greeks had a word, mitis, a kind of cunning wisdom, the ability to find the unexpected path through the labyrinth. We've traded metis for metrics, wisdom for data points, imagination for optimization. We're so busy making our systems 3% more efficient that we've forgotten to ask whether we're efficiently moving in the right direction or just streamlining our way to a dead end. The real tragedy is that humans are imagination machines. We're the species that looked at wolves and imagined dogs, looked at grass seeds and imagined bread, looked at the moon and imagined footprints, but somewhere along the way, we started treating imagination as child's play rather than the most practical tool in our arsenal. We relegated it to artists and writers, as if visionary thinking were a luxury rather than a necessity. This imaginative poverty shows up everywhere. In our politics, we oscillate between two flavors of the same basic assumptions. In our personal lives, we follow scripts written by dead strangers about what constitutes success. In our solutions to problems, we keep applying 20th century thinking to 21st century predicaments, like trying to fix a computer with a hammer. The most damning evidence? When someone does propose something genuinely different, such as universal basic income, other forms of government, degrowth economics, other monetary systems, radical life extension, or the abolition of prisons, we dismiss it as unrealistic, without ever examining what kind of reality we're trying to preserve. We've become curators of the status quo, archivists of our own limitations. But here's the thing, my friends. Imagination isn't some ethereal luxury. It's a muscle, and like any muscle, it atrophies without use. We've let ours wither while we've been busy being realistic, forgetting that every reality we inhabit was once someone's wild dream. Democracy was unrealistic under monarchy. Abolition was unrealistic under slavery. Women's suffrage was unrealistic under patriarchy. The unrealistic has a funny way of becoming inevitable, but only if someone dares to imagine it first. Now let me tell you about the devil's greatest trick in the 21st century, convincing us that algorithmic optimization equals human flourishing. We've handed over the keys to our attention, our desires, and increasingly our decisions to mathematical entities that understand correlation but not causation, pattern but not meaning, and engagement but not enrichment. These algorithms, let's call them the invisible puppeteers of our age, don't hate us. That would require a capacity for emotion they lack. No, they're far more dangerous than any malevolent force. They're indifferent optimization machines that have learned to hack our Paleolithic brains with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. They've discovered that outrage sells better than insight, that confirmation tastes sweeter than challenge, and that the quick dopamine hit of validation beats the slow burn of growth every time. Watch yourself for a single day, really watch, and count how many of your choices are actually yours. That YouTube video you stumbled upon, served to you by an algorithm that knows your viewing history better than you do. That argument you got into on X or virtually any other social media platform, engineered by a system that profits from engagement, and nothing engages quite like righteous anger. That product you suddenly needed, presented at the exact moment your defenses were lowest, when you were tired and scrolling and susceptible to the promise of a better life through consumption. We've become rats in a Skinner box of our own design, pressing levers for pellets of validation, our behavior shaped by forces we don't see and can't fully comprehend. It smells like a combination of Black Mirror episodes, but even crazier. The algorithm doesn't need to understand why you'll watch 17 videos about Japanese woodworking at 2 a.m. It just needs to know that you will, and that serving you an 18th will keep you on the platform for another 12 minutes, generating another $1.60 in ad revenue. But here's where it gets truly insidious. These algorithms are not only giving us what we want, they are altering what we want. They are training us, bit by bit, click by click, scroll by scroll, to desire what they're optimized to deliver. We think we're expressing our preferences, but we're really expressing the preferences that have been cultivated in us by systems designed to maximize engagement, and certainly not enlightenment. The cultural consequences are staggering. We're witnessing the wholesale fragmenting of shared reality as each of us disappears down our own perfectly customized rabbit hole. Your neighbor might be living in an entirely different informational universe, consuming facts that contradict yours, reinforced by an algorithm that has learned that challenging his worldview makes him click away. We're both polarized and living in parallel dimensions that occasionally catastrophically intersect. Artists create for the algorithm now, musicians write hooks for TikTok, and writers craft headlines for clicks. The algorithm doesn't care about truth or beauty or meaning. It cares about engagement metrics. And so, incrementally, neither do we. We've outsourced our cultural evolution to a system that would feed us nothing but cat videos and outrage porn if that's what kept us scrolling. The personal toll is equally devastating. We've developed digital metabolisms that require constant feeding. The algorithm has trained us to expect immediate gratification, infinite choice, and frictionless consumption. Then we wonder why we feel anxious, why we can't focus, and why life feels simultaneously overwhelming and boring. We've let an optimization algorithm optimize us, and it turns out that being optimized for engagement is very different from being optimized for happiness, wisdom, or growth. The most tragic part, we know this. We feel it in our bones every time we surface from a 3-hour scroll session, blinking like cave dwellers in the sun, wondering where the time went and why we feel so empty. But knowledge isn't enough when you're fighting an adversary that has mapped your neural pathways and knows exactly which buttons to push. We're not users, we are used. My dear friends, let me tell you about something so pervasive it's become invisible, like water to fish or capitalism to Americans. We are living through a loneliness epidemic of such magnitude that if it were a physical disease, we'd have declared a global health emergency by now. But because loneliness leaves no visible scars, no lesions we can photograph for medical journals, we treat it as a personal failing rather than a systemic crisis. The numbers are staggering in their bleakness. Surveys show that over half of adults report feeling lonely regularly. Among young adult digital natives, who we assumed would be the most connected generation in history, the rates approach 70%. We've built a world where you can have 1,000 Facebook friends and no one to call when you're crying at 3 a.m., where you can get 100 likes on your depression meme or YouTube video, but can't find someone to sit with you in silence while the darkness passes. But statistics are just the skeleton. Let me flesh out what this actually looks like. It looks like apartment buildings where neighbors pass each other for years without learning names. Like families sitting together at restaurants, each absorbed in their own glowing rectangle. Like the epidemic of deaths of despair. The final, fatal expressions of isolation when the weight of being alone in a crowd becomes too much to bear. We've confused connection with contact, mistaking the exchange of information for the exchange of humanity. We've built networks when what we needed was community. The difference? A network is utilitarian. It exists to move data, goods and services. A community exists to hold you when you break, to celebrate when you triumph, and to witness your becoming. You can't upload your soul to a network, but a community cradles it. The roots of this loneliness run deep and tangled. We've designed cities for cars, not conversations. We've structured work to be competitive rather than collaborative, where your colleague is more likely to be your rival than your confidant. We've atomized families, scattered them across continents in pursuit of opportunities, as if opportunity could compensate for the absence of people who knew you when you were 7 and scared of thunder. Social media promised to fix this, remember? It was going to bring us all together, erase distances, create a global village. Instead, it created a global Potemkin village, all facade and no foundation. We perform connection rather than experiencing it. We curate our loneliness, filtering it through Valencia or Nashville, hashtagging our isolation while hoping someone, anyone, will see through the performance to the person. The loneliness has curdled into something worse, a kind of defensive isolation. We've been hurt by the disconnect between digital promise and lived reality, so we retreat further. We ghost instead of having difficult conversations. We swipe past faces like we're sorting produce. We've made intimacy so frightening that we'd rather be safely alone than risk the vulnerability of being known. And the systems that profit from our isolation keep innovating. Dating apps that ensure you never stop dating. Social platforms that make you feel simultaneously overstimulated and understimulated. Entertainment so personalized that you never have to compromise with another human's preferences. We're being optimized into perfect solitary units, efficient consumers who never need the messy complications of community. The cruel irony is that we're lonelier in cities of millions than our ancestors were in villages of dozens. They had forced proximity, shared struggles, interwoven lives. We have optional everything, optional relationships, optional commitments, optional presence, and now even optional thinking. When everything is optional, everything becomes disposable, including each other. But loneliness isn't just sad, it's literally deadly. It increases your risk of premature death by 26%, comparable to obesity. It weakens immune systems, increases inflammation, and messes with sleep cycles. Your body, evolved for tribal connection, interprets chronic loneliness as a mortal threat because, evolutionarily speaking, it is. A lone human in the savannah didn't survive long. We're still those same humans, just with better phones and worse connections. The solutions we're offered are band-aids on a severed artery. Join a club, they say, as if scheduled socializing could replace organic community. Practice self-care, as if you could massage away the fundamental human need for belonging. Get a therapist. And yes, therapy helps, but when everyone needs therapy to cope with daily life, maybe the problem isn't individual psychology, but collective pathology. Real connection requires what our culture has made almost impossible: unscheduled time, geographic proximity, repeated exposure, and shared vulnerability. It requires what researchers call continuous proximity, the kind of closeness that happens naturally in healthy communities, but must be forced in our fractured world. It requires us to stay put long enough to grow roots, to choose depth over breadth and presence over productivity. We've made loneliness profitable and connection costly. Until we reverse that equation, we'll keep building higher walls around emptier lives, wondering why all our advances leave us feeling more primitive in our isolation than ever before. Gather round, dear seekers, while I tell you the most successful lie ever sold. That infinite growth on a finite planet is not only possible but necessary. That any economic system that doesn't expand at an exponential rate is dying. That we must consume more this year than last year or face catastrophe. We've built our entire civilization on the logic of cancer cells and then wonder why the patient seems to be dying. The growth imperative is so deeply embedded in our thinking that we can barely imagine alternatives. GDP must go up, stock prices must rise, companies must expand. Like sharks that die if they stop swimming, we've created an economy that collapses if it stops growing, even for a moment. The 2008 financial crisis, that was just a growth hiccup, a temporary stall in the eternal expansion machine. And look how it convulsed the entire world. But let's examine this madness with the cold eye of an alien anthropologist. We measure success by how much stuff we've pushed through the system, not whether that stuff made anyone's life better. A forest is worthless until it's lumber. A mountain is just unused real estate until it's a mine. A human is unproductive until they're consuming and producing at maximum capacity. We've created a vast machine for turning the living world into dead products and calling it progress. The absurdity becomes clear when you look at what counts as growth. A hurricane that destroys a city, great for GDP. Think of all the rebuilding, they say. Cancer treatment, a fantastic economic activity. Divorce lawyers, addiction counselors, antidepressants, all contributing to growth. We've created a system where breakdown is indistinguishable from breakthrough as long as money changes hands. Meanwhile, the real economy, which is the one that actually sustains life, is in free fall. Topsoil depletion, aquifer drawdown, species extinction, and climate destabilization. But these don't show up in our calculations until they become crises that require expensive fixes. We're like a trust fund kid spending down the principal and calling it income, high-fiving ourselves for our financial acumen while the inheritance evaporates. The growth obsession has colonized our personal lives too. We must constantly be improving, optimizing, hustling, scheming, and leveling up. More followers, more skills, more experiences, more productivity, more this, more that. We've internalized the growth imperative so completely that we feel guilty for staying the same size. As if stability was stagnation, as if being enough were never enough. Consider the logical endpoint of this thinking. If the economy must grow at 3% annually, which is a modest target by conventional standards, it doubles every 23 years. In a century, it's 16 times larger. In 2 centuries, 256 times. What exactly are we going to be producing and consuming at 256 times the current rate? Where will the resources come from? Where will the waste go? The math doesn't work unless you believe in magic, which apparently most economists do. The growth imperative has made us stupid in specific, predictable ways. We can't do simple things like repair instead of replace, because repair doesn't generate enough economic activity. We can't build things to last, because durability is the enemy of turnover. We can't be satisfied with enough, because satisfaction is the enemy of consumption. We've created a machine that requires our perpetual dissatisfaction to function. But here's the darkest truth. The growth isn't even making us happier. Beyond a certain point, a point most developed nations passed decades ago, additional GDP correlates with nothing good. Not happiness, not health, not social cohesion, not life satisfaction. We're like addicts who've long since stopped getting high, but can't stop increasing the dose. Except our drug is economic expansion, and our dealer is the entire structure of modern civilization. The alternatives aren't even particularly radical. Steady-state economics, circular design, degrowth, regenerative systems. Indigenous peoples managed to live sustainably for millennia without the growth imperative. But we've made these alternatives literally unthinkable, branded them as naive or dangerous or impossible. We'd rather imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And at the rate we're going, we'll get to see which comes first. The growth machine has made us efficient at all the wrong things. Efficient at extraction, not regeneration. Efficient at consumption, not satisfaction. Efficient at transaction, not connection. We've optimized for the metric instead of the meaning, forgetting that the map is not the territory, and GDP is not human flourishing. Allow me to paint you a picture of madness so normalized we call it necessary. We take curious, creative, and chaotic little humans who learn to walk and talk through pure experimentation, and we put them in boxes, literal boxes, with desks in rows. where they must sit still for hours, ask permission to pee, and learn that curiosity is only acceptable when it aligns with the curriculum. We call this education. The modern school system is a 19th century factory model dressed up with 21st century buzzwords. We still batch children by the manufacturing date. We call age, move them along an assembly line. We call grades, quality control them through standardized testing, and at the end, stamp them with a certificate that says, ready for work. Except that the work they're ready for is disappearing faster than we can print the diplomas. Here's what we're actually teaching: compliance over creativity, memorization over understanding, and competition over collaboration. This is one of the most messed up things when you really think about it. We teach children that intelligence means regurgitating the right answers rather than asking the right questions. We teach them that failure is shameful rather than instructive. We teach them that learning is something that happens in a building between bells, rather than a lifelong love affair with the unknown. The curriculum itself is a monument to inertia. We're preparing students for a world that no longer exists with tools that are already obsolete. We teach them to solve equations they'll never use while neglecting emotional intelligence. We drill grammar rules while their ability to think critically atrophies. We stuff their heads with facts they can Google in seconds while starving them of the wisdom to know what to search for and why. But the deepest damage isn't in what we teach. It's in what we kill. Watch a 5-year-old encounter the world. They're natural scientists. They are running experiments constantly. What happens if is their default mode? They're artists who need no permission to create, and philosophers who ask why, until adults beg them to stop. Then we send them to school, and year by year, the questions fade. By high school, they've learned that the point isn't to wonder, but to produce the expected answer. We've successfully transformed explorers into employees. The testing regime is particularly insane. We've created a system where teachers teach to the test, students study for the test, schools are funded based on the test, and everyone knows the test measures nothing important. It's like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then building an entire ecosystem around tree-climbing fish. The real skills of creativity, empathy, adaptability, and wisdom can't be bubbled in on a Scantron sheet, so we pretend they don't matter. Meanwhile, we're churning out graduates perfectly prepared for jobs that artificial intelligence will do better, cheaper, and faster. We're training humans to be inferior machines instead of superior humans. The jobs that will remain, the ones requiring emotional intelligence, creative problem-solving, ethical reasoning, and human connection, are precisely the skills we've systematically neglected or actively suppressed. The social engineering aspect is equally disturbing. School teaches hidden curricula. That authority must be obeyed, that worth is determined by external evaluation, that there's only one right answer, and that fitting in matters more than standing out. We're manufacturing citizens for a system rather than humans for a life. The factory model is not a bug. It is a feature designed to produce compliant workers for industrial capitalism. The fact that we no longer live in industrial capitalism hasn't prompted us to redesign the factory. The solutions we propose are mostly cosmetic. We add tablets instead of textbooks, as if digitizing obsolescence makes it innovative. We talk about 21st century skills while maintaining 19th century structures. We tweak the curriculum while leaving the fundamental assumptions unchallenged. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. If the Titanic was sailing toward a future where most of its passengers' skills were worthless on arrival, real education would look unrecognizable to us. It would be personalized, not standardized, interest-driven, not curriculum-driven, collaborative, not competitive. It would teach children how to learn, not what to learn. It would cultivate wisdom alongside knowledge, emotional intelligence alongside intellectual intelligence. It would prepare them for lives, not just livelihoods. But that would require admitting that our entire educational edifice is built on expired assumptions. It would mean acknowledging that we're stealing childhood in service of an economic system that no longer needs what we're producing. It would mean revolution, not reform. And so we continue, generation after generation, feeding our children into a machine that transforms wonder into compliance, creativity into conformity, and potential into product. The saddest part, everyone knows this. Teachers know it, parents know it, and students definitely know it. But we're trapped by institutional inertia, by sunk costs, and by the lack of alternatives. So we perpetuate a system that serves no one well, hoping that somehow this time it will produce different results. Einstein had a word for that. We also need to talk about the spectacular sleight of hand we've collectively performed. We've created a society that makes people sick, then convinced them that their sickness is a personal failing requiring individual treatment. It's like poisoning the water supply and then selling bottled water as the solution. Except the poison is modern life, and the bottles are filled with SSRIs. But please don't misunderstand me. Mental illness is real, medication saves lives, and therapy can be transformative. But we've built an entire industry around treating the symptoms of a sick society while carefully avoiding any examination of what's making the society sick in the first place. We're medicating normal responses to abnormal conditions and calling it healthcare. Consider the epidemic of anxiety. Of course we're anxious. We live in a world of perpetual threat, economic precarity, climate collapse, social isolation, information overload, and the constant pressure to optimize ourselves for a game whose rules keep changing. Our bodies are responding appropriately to inappropriate conditions. The anxiety is not the malfunction. In fact, its alarm systems work perfectly, screaming that something is deeply wrong. But instead of addressing what's wrong, we silence the alarm. Depression rates have skyrocketed, and we act puzzled. Really? We're puzzled that people are depressed in a world where we've systematically removed meaning, connection, and agency from daily life, where we've replaced community with competition, purpose with productivity, and wonder with worry. Depression might be the only sane response to an insane world, but we've pathologized sanity itself. The Diagnostic Bible of Psychiatry, the DSM, grows thicker with each edition, pathologizing ever more aspects of human experience. Grief lasting more than 2 weeks? That's major depressive disorder now. Child doesn't sit still in a classroom designed for factories? ADHD. Traumatized by trauma? There's a disorder for that. We're turning the normal spectrum of human experience into a catalogue of billable conditions. Meanwhile, the solutions we offer are predominantly individual. Take this pill, talk to this therapist, practice this mindfulness technique. All potentially helpful, but notice what's missing. Any suggestion that maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't in your head, but in the world your head is forced to navigate. We'll teach you coping mechanisms for coping with a world that requires constant coping, but we won't question why the world requires so much coping in the first place. The pharmaceutical solution is particularly revealing. We have more antidepressants than ever, yet depression rates keep climbing. We're medicating children at rates that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. We're creating customers for life, people who believe their brain chemistry is fundamentally broken rather than responding normally to a broken world. The pills often help, I'm not denying that. But they help the way painkillers help someone with a broken leg. They make it bearable to keep walking on it, but they don't fix the breaks. Therapy too has been co-opted. What began as a radical practice of self-discovery has been largely reduced to helping people adjust to unjust conditions. We teach stress management instead of questioning why modern life is so stressful. We work on individual trauma while ignoring collective trauma. We help people become more resilient to abuse instead of stopping the abuse. We've turned therapists into mechanics for the human cogs in an inhuman machine. The wellness industry is the free market evolution of this individualization. Feeling burned out? Try this meditation app. Stressed? Buy this essential oil. Depressed? Have you considered yoga? We've created a multi-billion-dollar industry, selling individual solutions to systemic problems. And the solutions themselves become another source of stress because they're another thing you're failing at if you're not mindful enough, grateful enough, or hydrated enough. Work in particular has become a primary driver of mental unwellness, but we've normalized it so thoroughly that we can't see it. We accept that Sunday night dread is universal, that everyone hates Mondays, and that thank God it's Friday is a cultural institution. We've built entire industries around helping people cope with jobs that crush their souls, including life coaches, productivity gurus, and workplace wellness programs. Everything except asking why we've accepted soul-crushing as a standard feature of employment. The real tragedy is that we're wasting the opportunity for genuine healing. Imagine if we took mental health as seriously as we claim to. We'd redesign work to be meaningful rather than merely productive. We'd build cities for humans rather than cars. We'd create educational systems that nurture rather than standardize. We'd measure success by well-being rather than GDP. We'd recognize that individual health is inseparable from collective health. Instead, we've built a system where feeling bad about bad conditions is itself seen as a disorder, where the solution to loneliness is a pill rather than community, where the response to meaninglessness is therapy rather than meaning. We've medicalized the human condition and then wondered why the condition keeps deteriorating despite all our medications. The mental health industrial complex serves a crucial function for the status quo. It privatizes social problems. It turns collective suffering into individual pathology. It locates the problem in your neurotransmitters rather than in your civilization. It keeps us looking inward when we should be looking outward, working on ourselves when we should be working on our world. Listen carefully, because this might be the last thing you pay attention to today. We are living through the largest scale hijacking of human consciousness in history, and we're not only allowing it, we're also paying for the privilege. Our attention, that precious faculty that makes us human, has been turned into a commodity, extracted and sold like oil, except the oil field is your mind and the derricks never stop pumping. The attention economy is a war zone where billion-dollar corporations deploy armies of neuroscientists, behavioral psychologists, and data analysts to capture and monetize your consciousness. They know more about your mental vulnerabilities than you do. They've mapped your cognitive biases like conquistadors mapping coastlines, and they're colonizing your mind with the efficiency of a 19th century empire. Every app on your phone is engineered like a casino. The variable reward schedules that keep you pulling the lever on slot machines, that's your notification system. The way casinos remove clocks and windows to dissociate you from time, that's your infinite scroll. The free drinks that lower inhibitions, that's the dopamine hit from likes and comments. Except casinos have to follow regulations, and the attention merchants operate in the wild west of your frontal cortex. We've become attention addicts, and like all addicts, we're in denial. I can quit any time, we say, while checking our phones 96 times a day. I'm just staying informed, we insist, while doom scrolling through curated outrage. It's how I stay connected, we rationalize, while our ability to connect with the person in front of us atrophies like an unused muscle. The dealers of this drug aren't hiding. They're publicly traded companies with mission statements about connecting the world and organizing information. They hire the brightest minds of our generation, who could be curing cancer or solving other global problems with high impact, and task them with increasing engagement metrics, which is corporate speak for how can we steal more of your life. But here's what makes this different from every other extractive industry. They're not just taking your attention, they're reshaping your capacity to pay attention. The average human attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds in the past 2 decades. We're being cognitively strip-mined, our mental topsoil eroded notification by notification until we can barely focus long enough to finish a... Wait, what was I saying? The cultural consequences are catastrophic. Deep thinking requires sustained attention. Wisdom requires reflection. Creativity requires boredom. Love requires presence. We're losing the ability to do any of these things, trading them for the thin gruel of perpetual stimulation. We're raising a generation that can't tolerate the space between stimuli, who experience silence as an emergency requiring immediate phone checking. Books are becoming archaeological artifacts. The kind of deep reading that reshapes consciousness and allows you to inhabit another mind for hours is becoming as rare as meditation in Times Square. We're losing the ability to follow complex arguments, to hold nuance, to think in anything longer than tweet-length chunks. We're formatting our minds to match our media, and the media keeps getting shorter, faster, and simpler. The attention war has turned us into double agents against ourselves. We install apps to block apps. We buy books about focus that we can't focus enough to read. We take digital detoxes like addicts going to rehab, only to relapse the moment we return to normal life. Because normal life now requires the very thing that's killing us: constant connectivity, perpetual availability, infinite distraction. Work has been colonized completely. The open office, which is clearly our dystopian productivity theatre, ensures no one can concentrate. Slack and email create an expectation of instant response. Multitasking, which isn't real, just rapid attention switching, is not only expected but celebrated. We've created workplaces perfectly designed to prevent the kind of deep work that creates actual value, then wonder why we're all so busy accomplishing nothing. Even our leisure has been weaponized. Netflix asking, "Are you still watching?" is the digital equivalent of a bartender cutting you off, except it's half-hearted, and we all know it. Binge watching, binge scrolling, binge everything. We've turned consumption into an extreme sport. We're so overstimulated that normal life feels like sensory deprivation. We need constant input to feel normal, like addicts who need drugs just to feel baseline. The solutions offered are individual as always. Practice digital minimalism, they say, as if individual willpower could combat billion-dollar algorithms. Be more mindful, as if mindfulness were a match for an industry designed to make you mindless. Set boundaries, as if boundaries meant anything when the invader lives in your pocket and you've given it the keys. The real solution would require treating attention as a human right rather than a commodity. It would mean regulating the attention economy, like we regulate drugs or gambling. It would mean redesigning our tools to serve us rather than exploit us. It would mean recognizing that a population with destroyed attention spans can't maintain democracy, can't solve complex problems, can't even love each other properly, and definitely can't save the world. But that would require the one thing we've lost: the ability to pay attention long enough to change virtually anything. What is the most successful alchemy in human history? I'm glad that you asked. The most successful alchemy is that we've transformed everything that makes life worth living into something that can be bought, sold, and ultimately destroyed by the logic of the market. We've monetized mystery, commodified connection, and put a price tag on experiences that used to be priceless. We're living in a world where everything has a cost, but nothing has value. Water, that substance without which life ends in 3 days, is now a branded commodity sold in plastic bottles at a 4,000% markup from the tap. Air, in cities like Beijing and Delhi, is packaged and sold in cans. One guy made $1 million selling rocks as pets. He even had those little instructions. We've basically commodified the elements themselves, and we're working our way through the periodic table of human experience with the efficiency of locusts. But the physical commodification is just the beginning. We've moved on to monetizing abstractions. Your privacy? That's a product now sold by data brokers you've never heard of to buyers you'll never meet. Your social relationships? Managed by platforms that profit from your connections. Your creativity? Content for someone else's platform. Your very identity? A brand to be managed, optimized, and monetized. Dating has become a marketplace where humans are products with profiles, photos, and feature lists. We swipe through potential partners like we're shopping on Amazon, filtered by height, income, and education. We've turned the mysterious dance of attraction into an efficient market. And then we wonder why romance feels dead. It's dead because we killed it with spreadsheet logic and algorithm-driven matching. Friendship, too, has been productized. We have apps for finding friends, like friendship was a service lacking only the right platform. We network instead of connecting and accumulate contacts instead of companions. Professional relationships are managed through LinkedIn, where every interaction is performed for an audience, and every connection is potentially monetizable. We've turned human warmth into social capital and wonder why we're all so cold. Even rebellion has been commodified. Counterculture becomes fashion faster than you can say punk rock. Protest symbols become brand logos. Revolutionary ideas become TED Talks. We've created a system so voracious it can digest its own opposition and sell it back as product. Your rage against the machine? There's a t-shirt for that, probably made by children in a factory that would make the machine blush. Childhood, remember when that was sacred? Now it is a market segment. We've turned play into organized activities with performance metrics. We've transformed imagination into screen time. We've monetized every moment from birth, gender reveal parties, a recent invention of the attention economy, to graduation, with its accompanying debt slavery. Children are consumers in training, and their wonder is systematically replaced with want. Experience itself has become a commodity. We don't have experiences, we consume them. Travel is about collecting destinations and photographing yourself in front of monuments to prove you were there. Concerts are watched through phone screens, the recording more important than the moment. We are so busy commodifying our experiences that we forget to actually experience them. The wellness industry has commodified health itself. Not content with monetizing sickness, that's old news. We now monetize the pursuit of health. Mindfulness, once a spiritual practice, is now a $1.2 billion industry. Self-care, which should be as natural as breathing, requires products, services, and subscriptions. We've turned the absence of suffering into a luxury good available to those who can afford it. Even time, which should be literally the most democratic of resources, equally distributed at 24 hours per person per day, has been thoroughly commodified. We buy time-saving devices with the time we spend earning money. We outsource our lives to the gig economy. Someone else walks our dogs, delivers our food, and assembles our furniture. The rich buy time from the poor, who sell it because they must, creating a temporal inequality that makes the wealth gap look quaint. Knowledge, which multiplies when shared, has been locked behind paywalls, parceled into proprietary packages, and metered out by subscription. Scientific papers that could save lives sit behind $40 paywalls. Educational resources that could lift millions from poverty are hoarded by institutions charging $50,000 a year for access. We've made wisdom scarce in an age when it could be infinite. The culmination of this commodification is the monetization of attention itself. But I've already ranted about that. What I haven't mentioned is how commodification changes the nature of what's commodified. A forest becomes timber the moment you price it. A song becomes content the moment you stream it. A moment becomes a photo opportunity the moment you hashtag it. The market doesn't just trade things, it transforms them. We've created a Midas touch in reverse. Everything we monetize turns to lead. Love becomes transaction, art becomes content, wisdom becomes information, and community becomes network. We're so busy pricing everything that we've forgotten that the most valuable things are valuable precisely because they can't be bought. The escape is not, however, to reject all commerce. We're not going back to subsistence farming, but we need to rebuild the walls between market and life to declare some things too precious to price. We need an economy that serves life rather than consuming it. We need to remember that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. But first, we need to stop selling ourselves the lie that everything is for sale. My dear fellow inmates, friends, let me tell you about the prison we've built where the walls are invisible, the guards are algorithms, and we've not only accepted our incarceration but pay monthly fees for premium surveillance packages. We're living in a panopticon that would make Bentham weep with envy. Except we've decorated our cells with ring lights and call them smart homes. The genius of modern surveillance is that it doesn't feel like surveillance. It feels like convenience. The smartphone is tracking your location. It's just helping you find the nearest coffee shop. The smart speaker is listening to your conversations. It's just waiting to help with the weather forecast. That fitness tracker is monitoring your heartbeat. It's just keeping you healthy. We've been convinced that being watched is actually being cared for. We carry our own tracking devices voluntarily, upgrade them annually, and panic when we leave them behind. We've achieved what no totalitarian regime ever could, a population that surveils itself and feels naked without the surveillance. East Germany's Stasi needed one informant for every 66 citizens. We've made every citizen their own informant, filing continuous reports on themselves to anyone who wants to buy the data. The corporate surveillance state makes government surveillance look quaint. The NSA wishes it had the data Facebook collects freely. Google knows more about your desires than your therapist. Amazon knows more about your habits than your spouse. And your phone knows more about your movements than you do. We've handed over our privacy not to Big Brother, but to Big Tech. And at least Big Brother pretended it was for our own good. Big Tech doesn't even bother pretending. It's for the advertisers. But here's where it gets truly insidious. We've normalized not just being watched, but performing for the watchers. Because the watchers never left, if you know what I'm saying. We've internalized the surveillance so completely that we surveil ourselves, curating our digital selves for an audience that may or may not be watching. We've become method actors in the movie of our own lives, never breaking character because the cameras never stop rolling. Social media turned us all into voluntary participants in our own surveillance. We tag our locations, upload our faces, document our relationships, and broadcast our thoughts. We've created the most comprehensive surveillance database in history, and we did it for free, for fun, for the dopamine hit of likes and comments, or for the sake of it. The FBI used to have to work to build a file on you. Now you build it yourself and make it public. The surveillance has gotten so granular it's subcutaneous. Wearables track our steps, our sleep and our heart rates. Smart homes monitor our energy usage, our viewing habits and our coming and going. Cars record our driving patterns. Even our refrigerators are getting smart, which apparently means they need to know everything about our eating habits and report back to headquarters. We've created a world where privacy is not just dead, but incomprehensible. Try explaining to a teenager why you don't want to share your location with everyone you know. Try opting out of data collection and watch how quickly modern life becomes impossible. Privacy has gone from a right to an eccentricity to an impossibility. We're nostalgic for a concept we've willingly surrendered. The consequences ripple out in ways we're only beginning to understand. Self-censorship becomes automatic when you know you're always being watched. Risk-taking decreases. Conformity increases. We sand down our rough edges, become our own PR departments, careful not to say or do anything that might be taken out of context by an employer, an algorithm, a future that might judge us by standards we can't yet imagine. Children grow up having never known privacy. They emerge from the womb into a world of baby monitors, their first steps uploaded to Instagram and their childhood archived in cloud storage. By the time they're old enough to consent to being photographed, they already have a digital footprint larger than most 20th century celebrities. We've stolen their option to be private before they knew it existed. The surveillance state has deputized us all. See something, say something has evolved into see everything, record everything, and share everything. We surveil each other with a dedication no government could mandate. Camera phones turned us into a distributed surveillance network, each node eager to capture and share any deviation from the norm. We've crowdsourced the Panopticon. Even resistance is monitored. Protest, your phone tracks you there. Encryption, that itself becomes a flag. Try to opt out? Your absence of data becomes data. We've created a system where the act of seeking privacy makes you suspicious. The only way to be truly private is to never have engaged with the digital world, and that ship sailed for most of us decades ago. The tragedy is that we traded our privacy for so little. A few convenient features, some targeted ads, and the ability to share cat photos with friends. We valued our privacy at the cost of a free email account. We sold our birthright for a mess of digital pottage, and we're still hungry. The path back requires more than individual action. Just don't use social media is like saying just hold your breath in a polluted city. We need to reclaim privacy as a fundamental right, not a luxury good. We need to make surveillance expensive, difficult, and socially unacceptable, rather than profitable, easy, and normalized. We need to remember that privacy isn't about having something to hide. It's about having space to become. But first, we need to remember what privacy felt like. And for many of us, that memory is already fading, replaced by the comfort of being known, tracked, and quantified at every moment of our increasingly transparent lives. We need to discuss the spectacular bonfire we've made of human knowledge. We've democratized information so thoroughly that we've accidentally demolished wisdom. We're drowning in data while dying of thirst for understanding. We've created a world where everyone has access to all information and no one knows what to do with it. A library of Babel where every book is open, but no one can read. The internet promised to make us all smarter. Instead, it made us all confident. There's a difference, a fatal difference between having access to information and understanding it. We've confused Googling with knowledge, browsing with research, and sharing with thinking. We've created 1 billion autonomous universities where everyone is simultaneously student and professor, and the only qualification needed is an internet connection. The death of expertise isn't just about disrespecting experts, it's about losing the very concept of expertise itself. We've flattened all knowledge into equally weighted opinions. A climate scientist who spent decades studying atmospheric physics? Their opinion counts the same as someone who watched a YouTube video, a virologist with 40 years of experience, balanced against someone who did their own research on Facebook. We've democratized authority so thoroughly that we've made truth itself a matter of popular vote. This isn't anti-intellectualism. That would require recognizing that intellectuals exist. This is intellectual nihilism, the belief that all opinions are created equal, that expertise is just elitism in disguise, and that the only difference between an expert and a layperson is confidence. We've created an epistemological flat earth where every perspective is equally valid because we can no longer distinguish between perspective and knowledge. The Dunning-Kruger effect has gone viral. The less someone knows about a subject, the more confident they are in their opinions about it. We've built entire media ecosystems that profit from this confidence, that feed and nurture it, that turn ignorance into a badge of authenticity. I'm not a doctor, but has become the beginning of too many sentences that end in preventable tragedies. Search engines and social media algorithms have made it worse. They don't show you the best information. They show you information that confirms what you already believe. You can find support for any position, no matter how absurd, and the algorithm will helpfully serve you more of the same. We've created echo chambers so perfect that people can live entire lives without encountering a fact that challenges their worldview. The cult of doing your own research would be admirable if people knew how to research. But research doesn't mean finding sources that agree with you. It means understanding methodology, evaluating sources, recognizing bias, and synthesizing contradictory information. It requires skills we've stopped teaching in favor of teaching to tests. We've given everyone a library card to the Universal Library, but no one has taught them how to read. Meanwhile, actual experts are treated with suspicion or outright hostility. They're seen as elites, gatekeepers, or part of the conspiracy to keep the truth from regular people. The more expertise someone has, the less they're trusted. We prefer the wisdom of crowds to the knowledge of individuals, forgetting that crowds can be wrong. Catastrophically, historically, and repeatedly wrong. The consequences are deadly literal. People die from preventable diseases because they trust mommy bloggers over medical professionals. Climate change accelerates because we treat scientific consensus as just another opinion. Democracy itself corrodes when we can't agree on basic facts, when every piece of evidence can be dismissed as fake news if it doesn't align with our preferences. We've created a perfect storm. Unlimited access to information, no ability to evaluate it, and platforms that profit from confusion. Add a species naturally prone to confirmation bias and pattern seeking, and you get our current predicament. A world where everyone knows everything and understands nothing. The experts themselves bear some responsibility. Too many hid behind jargon, stayed in academic towers, and spoke only to each other. They forgot that expertise comes with an obligation to communicate, to teach, to make knowledge accessible without dumbing it down. They ceded the public square to charlatans and wondered why no one listened when they finally showed up. But the larger fault lies with a culture that mistakes comfort for truth, that prefers simple lies to complex realities, and that has traded the difficult work of understanding for the easy pleasure of knowing. We've made expertise optional at the exact moment in history when we most need it, when the challenges we face require deep and specialized knowledge. The solution isn't to restore some mythical age of deference to authority. It's to rebuild the concept of earned authority, to teach critical thinking alongside Google searching, and to make expertise accessible without destroying it. It's to recognize that democratizing information requires democratizing the tools to understand it. We need to resurrect the radical idea that some people know more about some things than others. And that's not just okay, but necessary. That expertise isn't elitism, but dedication. That those years of study might actually teach you something you can't learn from a YouTube video. That wisdom can't be crowdsourced, and truth isn't a popularity contest. Until we do, we'll continue mistaking noise for signal, confidence for competence, and access for understanding. We'll be the most informed and least knowledgeable generation in history. Brilliant at finding information, but terrible at knowing what it means. Let me share with you the absurdist theatre of modern work. We have more productivity tools than ever, work longer hours than our grandparents, optimize every moment of our existence, and yet we feel less productive, less accomplished, less satisfied than generations who worked with typewriters and took 2 martini lunches. We've turned productivity into a religion and burned ourselves as offerings on its altar. The productivity industrial complex has convinced us that the problem with our lives is efficiency. If we could just find the right app, the right system, or the right morning routine, we could finally get enough done to feel, what, complete, worthy, human, sane, normal. We've been sold the lie that we're machines in need of optimization rather than humans in need of meaning. Consider the modern knowledge workers' day. They wake to a phone alarm after tracking their sleep cycles, check email before their feet hit the floor, optimize their morning routine, cold shower, meditation app, bulletproof coffee. Commute while listening to productivity podcasts. Arrive at work to find 47 tabs open, 3 project management systems running, and enough notifications to induce seizures. They'll attend meetings about meetings, answer emails about emails, and generate reports about productivity that reduce actual productivity. They'll go home exhausted, having been frantically busy all day while accomplishing nothing of value. We've confused motion with progress, busyness with importance, and output with outcome. We measure productivity in emails sent, meetings attended, hours logged, and tasks completed. Everything except actual value created or problem solved. We've gamified work, turning it into a series of checkbox achievements that feel meaningful in the moment but amount to nothing in aggregate. The tools meant to save us time have become time vampires. Email was supposed to replace slow postal mail. Now we send 300 billion emails daily and check our inbox every 6 minutes. Smartphones were supposed to free us from our desks. Instead, they chained us to work 24/7. Every productivity innovation has produced its opposite. More work, more stress, and more sense that we're falling behind. We've entered an arms race with ourselves. As we get more productive, expectations rise to meet our new capacity. It's like running on a treadmill that speeds up every time you match its pace. The reward for efficiency is more work. The prize for productivity is higher targets. We're sprinting toward a finish line that keeps moving away. The cult of productivity has infected our personal lives. We optimize our leisure, scheduling relaxation with the same intensity we schedule meetings. We track our meditation streaks, measure our fun, and quantify our relationships. We've turned life itself into a productivity challenge, forgetting that the point of being productive at work was supposedly to have more time for life. Hustle culture is the terminal stage of this disease. It preaches that every moment not spent producing is a moment wasted. Sleep is for the weak. Weekends are for side hustles. Self-care is rebranded as productivity optimization, and you meditate to be a better worker, exercise to increase energy for work, and socialize to network. Everything serves the great god productivity. Meanwhile, we're less productive than ever by any meaningful measure. Innovation has slowed. Wages have stagnated relative to actual productivity gains. Most of us spend our days on what David Graeber called bullshit jobs, also known as the roles that add no value to the world but require us to pretend they do. We're productivity theatre performers, and the show must go on. The paradox deepens when you realize that real creative work, which is the kind that actually moves humanity forward, requires the opposite of our productivity obsession. It requires slack, wandering, boredom and play. Every great breakthrough came from someone staring out a window, not from someone optimizing their workflow. But we've eliminated slack from our lives, scheduled every moment, and optimized away the very conditions that produce genuine innovation. We've created a generation of productivity addicts who need constant stimulation to feel valuable. Empty time feels like failure, silence feels like stagnation. We've internalized the logic of the machine so completely that we judge ourselves by machine metrics. More uptime, more efficiency, more output. We've forgotten that humans aren't meant to be productive in the way machines are productive. The real tragedy is that we know this isn't working. We feel it in our bones. The exhaustion, the emptiness, and the sense that we're running faster and faster to stay in the same place. But we double down, thinking the problem is that we're not productive enough. We download another app, try another system, listen to podcasts while we commute, wake up 1 hour earlier and sleep another hour later. We're trying to solve the problem with the thinking that created it. What would real productivity look like? It would measure outcomes, not output. Value created, not hours worked. Problems solved, not tasks completed. It would recognize that the most productive thing you can do might be to stare at the ceiling for an hour. That a 4-day work week might produce more value than a 7-day hustle. That humans are rhythmic creatures who need rest, play and meaning as much as they need work. But that would require admitting that our entire approach to work is broken, that we've been optimizing the wrong things, that productivity isn't a virtue but a tool, and we've been worshipping the hammer instead of building the house. It would require revolution, not evolution. Until then, we'll continue our productivity pantomime, frantically busy accomplishing nothing, exhausted by our efficiency, and productive in every way except the ones that matter. We'll be the most optimized generation in history, and the least satisfied. The most disorienting aspect of modern life is that we no longer inhabit the same reality. Not metaphorically, but literally. We've fractured into billions of individual realities, each curated by algorithms, each confirmed by selected facts, and each incompatible with the others. We're polarized and living in parallel universes that occasionally catastrophically collide. The political echo chambers are the symptoms. This is the complete breakdown of consensus reality. We can't agree on basic facts anymore. What's true in your newsfeed might be false in mine. The video you saw might be deepfaked. The study you're citing might be from a journal that doesn't exist. We're operating from entirely different fact sets. The information ecosystem has evolved from scarcity to abundance to chaos. We went from having too little information to having too much to having no way to distinguish information from misinformation. We're drowning in a sea of content, where truth and lies look identical, where fiction spreads faster than fact, and where reality itself becomes a matter of opinion. Social media algorithms filtered and created our realities. Each of us lives in a custom-built information bubble, perfectly designed to confirm our biases, inflame our emotions, and keep us engaged. The algorithm doesn't care about truth, it cares about engagement, and nothing engages quite like content that makes us feel righteous, angry, or superior. We've reached the point where two people can watch the same event and see completely different things. It's not even about interpretation anymore. It's literally seeing differently. Their feeds will show them different angles, different contexts, and different commentaries. Their realities will diverge from the moment of observation. They'll argue not just about what it means, but about what actually happened. The fracturing goes even deeper than news or politics. We're losing shared cultural references, shared stories, and shared experiences. The monoculture is dead, replaced by infinite microcultures that never intersect. There's no water cooler show everyone watches, and no singular event everyone experiences the same way. We're becoming strangers to each other, unable to find common ground because we no longer stand on the same ground. Language itself is fracturing. Words mean different things in different realities. Freedom, justice, and truth aren't shared concepts anymore, but tribal markers. We use the same words to mean opposite things, then wonder why communication breaks down. We're speaking the same language but different dialects, and the dialects are diverging faster than we can translate. The epistemic crisis, the inability to know what's true, has created a kind of collective vertigo. When you can't trust any source, when every fact has an equal and opposite alternative fact, when expertise is just another opinion, you're left floating in a sea of uncertainty. Some people respond by clinging harder to their chosen reality. Others give up on truth altogether. Deep fakes and AI-generated content are about to make this exponentially worse. We're entering an era where video evidence, once the gold standard of proof, means nothing. Where anyone can be shown saying anything. Where your own eyes and ears can't be trusted. We're speeding toward a reality crisis that makes our current confusion look quaint. The business model of the internet depends on this fracturing. Unified reality doesn't generate clicks. Shared truth doesn't drive engagement. Consensus is boring. Conflict is profitable. Every platform profits from division and from the rage and confusion that comes from reality fracture. We've built an economy that requires our epistemic breakdown to function. Even attempting to bridge realities becomes impossible when we can't agree on bridge-building materials. Fact-checking is dismissed as bias. Evidence is just opinion. Logic is a tool of oppression. We've developed immune systems against opposing views and antibodies that reject foreign facts before they can infect our worldview. We're in different realities and allergic to each other's realities. The psychological toll is severe. Humans need a shared reality to function. We're social creatures who build meaning through consensus. When that consensus shatters, we experience a kind of existential loneliness. We're surrounded by people who might as well be aliens, whose worlds operate by different rules, and whose truths are our lies. Children grow up native to this fractured landscape, never knowing a unified reality. They learn to code switch between realities, to hold multiple incompatible truths simultaneously, and to navigate the multiverse of human belief. They're adapted to the new world in ways that make older generations dizzy, but adaptation isn't the same as thriving. We're conducting an experiment in radical perspectivism, where every viewpoint is valid because no viewpoint can be verified. We've achieved the postmodern condition. Truth is dead, everything is narrative, and reality is what you make it. Except instead of liberation, we've found chaos, and instead of playful multiplicity, we've found paranoid fragmentation. The way back, if there is one, requires rebuilding shared epistemic foundations, common standards for truth, trusted institutions, shared experiences. But all of these require something we've lost, which is the belief that objective reality exists and matters. That some things are true regardless of whether they confirm our biases. That we might be wrong about something, and that's okay. Until we rebuild that foundation, we'll continue drifting apart, each in our own custom reality, occasionally bumping into each other with increasing violence and confusion. We'll be the most connected and least coherent civilization in history. Billions of people sharing the same planet but living in different worlds. And so we arrive, dear friends, at the center of the labyrinth. The meta-problem that encompasses all others. We are living through a crisis of meaning so profound that we've forgotten we're in crisis. We've lost the plot of our own story, and worse, we've forgotten that stories need plots. We're characters in search of an author, except we've declared the author dead and the narrative oppressive. This isn't the simple nihilism of God is dead. That was just the opening act. We've systematically deconstructed every source of meaning humans have ever found. Religion, nation, family, work, progress, nature, art, and even the self. We've become such skilled critics that we've demolished everything worth believing in, then stood in the rubble wondering why we feel so empty. We've actively dismantled our traditional meaning-making structures. Religion became the opium of the masses. Patriotism became toxic nationalism. Family became an oppressive institution. Work became exploitation. Progress became a colonial myth. We had good reasons for each deconstruction, but we forgot to build anything in their place. We're living in the cleared ground where meaning used to grow, wondering why we're so hungry. The market rushed to fill the vacuum, of course. Meaning became another consumer choice. Find your purpose in your career, in your lifestyle, in your brand. We've turned the search for meaning into shopping, trying on identities like clothes, discarding them when they don't fit. But meaning isn't something you can buy or choose, dear friends. It's something you discover or create through commitment, through limitation, and through depth. Everything the market teaches us to avoid. We've replaced grand narratives with personal narratives, but personal narratives are too small to carry the weight of meaning. Follow your passion sounds liberating until you realize passion alone can't structure a life. Be yourself sounds empowering until you realize you don't know who that is. We've made each individual responsible for creating their own meaning from scratch, like asking everyone to invent their own language and then wondering why no one can communicate. The happiness imperative makes it worse. We've confused meaning with feeling good and purpose with pleasure. But meaning often involves suffering, sacrifice, and accepting limitations. The meaningful life might not be the happy life, but we've made happiness mandatory, pathologized sadness, and treated struggle as failure rather than as the forge where meaning is made. Even our attempts to find meaning become meaningless. Mindfulness without context is just pleasant dissociation. Gratitude without action is just mood management. Self-care without self-transcendence is just maintenance. We've turned wisdom traditions into life hacks, stripped them of their transformative power, and made them safe for consumption. We're performing meaning rather than living it. The existentialists saw this coming. They warned us that freedom would be terrifying, and that the burden of creating meaning would crush most of us. They were optimists. They thought we'd at least try. Instead, we've outsourced meaning to algorithms, letting recommendation engines decide what we value. We've automated away not just work, but worth. Work itself has become meaningless for most. We've created entire industries that add no value, solve no problems, and create nothing beautiful or useful. But we can't admit this because work is supposed to provide meaning. So we pretend, and the pretending becomes another layer of meaninglessness. We're actors who've forgotten we're acting, living lives that feel like performances of lives. The young feel it most acutely. They've inherited a world where every institution is suspect, every truth is relative, and every meaning is provisional. They're told to create their own meaning while being given no tools, no materials, and no examples of what meaning looks like. They're drowning in options while dying of thirst for purpose. No wonder they're anxious, depressed, and paralyzed. We've given them freedom without structure, choices without wisdom, and opportunities without direction. Even discussing meaning has become embarrassing. It feels naive, unsophisticated, like admitting you still believe in Santa Claus. We're more comfortable discussing our traumas rather than our hopes, and our anxieties rather than our aspirations. We've made cynicism sophisticated and sincerity suspect. We'd rather be clever than wise, ironic than earnest, and critical than committed. The political implications are terrifying. People without meaning are easy to radicalize. Give them an enemy, a tribe, and a cause, however twisted, and they'll embrace it like drowning people grabbing rope. The rise of extremism isn't present only in economics or technology. It's about millions of people so desperate for meaning that they'll accept any story that makes them the hero, or any narrative that makes their pain make sense. We can't go back to the old meanings. They're gone, and for good reasons. We can't just restore religion, nationalism, and traditional roles. Those structures were built for different worlds, and they carried their own cruelties. But we can't go forward without meaning either. We're stuck in the wasteland between old meanings and new ones, and the wasteland is killing us. The way forward isn't clear, but it must involve building new structures of meaning that can hold the weight of human existence. Meaning that encompasses our scientific understanding without being reduced to it. That honors individual autonomy without abandoning collective purpose. That accepts uncertainty without surrendering to nihilism. That finds the sacred in the secular and the transcendent in the immanent. We need philosophers more than politicians, poets more than programmers, and wisdom more than information. We need to remember that humans are meaning-making animals, that we literally can't live without purpose, that a meaningless life is a kind of death. We need to stop treating the search for meaning as a luxury or a weakness and recognize it as the most practical necessity. Until we do, we'll continue wandering in the wasteland, amusing ourselves to death, optimizing our emptiness and consuming our way toward a happiness that never comes. We'll be the cleverest and most miserable generation, the freest and most lost, the most capable and most wasted. But meaning, like spring, always returns. Not because it's guaranteed, but because humans can't help but create it. Even in the wasteland, people fall in love, create art, sacrifice for others, and build beautiful things. Even in our meaninglessness, we mean. Our crisis is that we've forgotten that meaning is necessary. My dear friends, I've kept you here for 13 chapters of lamentation, and you've been patient with my desperate diagnostics. But diagnosis isn't a cure, and knowing what's wrong isn't the same as making it right. Still, I have to believe, that naming our demons is the first step in the ancient dance of exorcism that never disappeared. It just happens psychologically, and the effects of our psyches flow over our material world. We're living through the growing pains of a species that's outgrown its old stories but hasn't yet written new ones. We're in the messy middle and the dark forest between worldviews. It's terrifying, and it's necessary, and it's exactly where we need to be. The problems I've outlined are the features of a civilization in transition. Every solution creates new problems, and every answer raises new questions. Failure doesn't look like that. That's growth. We're solving for evolution. So what do? We do what humans have always done in impossible situations. We continue. We build better systems while knowing they'll need rebuilding. We create meaning while accepting uncertainty. We connect despite isolation. We imagine better worlds while living in this one. We continue to love despite all the hatred. The 13 problems I've described are real, but so is our capacity to address them. Not through some grand solution or revolutionary moment, but through the slow, steady work of repair. Through choosing imagination over optimization, wisdom over cleverness, connection over consumption, and remembering that we're humans creating meaning together. The world is broken. It always has been. That's not a reason for despair. It's a call to action. We're the ones who broke it, which means we're the ones who can fix it. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to hand something better to those who come after. That's all we've ever done, and all we ever need to do. With love and stubborn hope, your companion in the beautiful catastrophe of being human.